Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we'll have myself, Mighty Pete, and we're joined by the Liam Naden. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Pete.
It's great. It was a good afternoon, good evening. We're not quite across the Atlantic. We're across the RC, I suppose, in many ways. You're joining us from France today, Liam.
Yes. So nice part of the world to be in.
Yeah, indeed. So listen, to give everyone our listeners here a bit of a background. So Liam is a speaker, teacher, writer, and researcher. And he helps you to understand the process of creating true success in your life by understanding how to use your brain the right way, overcoming your problems, achieving your goals, and ending frustration. He is the host of the podcast, Using Your Brain for Success, author of Rebalancing Your Brain for Success, and creator of Neurostate Rebalancing, NSR, a process which automatically gets your brain working the right way to bring you the life that you want. Liam is also an experienced marriage and relationship coach, host of the Growing in Love for Life podcast, author of 20 books, and creator of 4 relationship coaching programs. Liam, it's awesome to have you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on. That's quite a menu of experience you have before you. So it's a pleasure to have you on here today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
So give us a bit of a background first of all. What does Fire in the Belly mean to Liam then?
Well, I guess it's another way of putting it probably is living your passion, isn't it? And it seems to be a big thing these days, trying to find your passion and let alone to live it. And I guess one of the biggest issues is how many people actually do, which is a bit sad. And what I've discovered through my work on the brain is there's actually a way of using your brain that unlocks your passion, if you like, that unfortunately has sort of got lost as an idea along the way.
Well, we're going to get into that, but first of all, tell us, have you found your passion? Where are you in relation to Fire in the Belly in your journey then?
Yes, I feel like after many years of going in down the wrong directions, yes, I'm very happy, thanks.
Perfect. I like it. So then talk to us then. So you talked about this, really sort of, is it working on the brain? Is it bypassing the brain? What's the best way of describing it here in this rebalancing exercise?
Okay, well, would it be better if I give you a bit of a background as how I came upon this whole concept?
Yes.
All right. Because probably like many of your listeners and viewers, I've been driven to find the fire in the belly, as it were, pretty well all my life. And another way of describing it is trying to figure out how can I be happy and successful. And I started off as a child looking at religion. And I was brought up in a strong Catholic family. I'm the eldest of 8 children. And, I was always taught by my parents and my teachers and the priests and the Catholic schools I went to that, if you want to be happy and successful, if you really want to live a great life, decide what you want, pray to God and ask for what you want, and God will give it to you. That sounded pretty good advice. So I really tried that. And I remember, going to mass when I was about 9 or 10, I think, every day for a month to pray to God for something very specific I wanted. And I thought, I'm going to test God. I didn't really say it in those words, but I'm going to test God. I'm going to test this idea that if you want to be happy and successful, ask for what you want, ask God, and he'll give it to you. As time went on, I realized, I can't remember what that was, but I don't think I got whatever it was I was asking for. And I noticed I wasn't really getting what I was asking for through prayer. And I looked at my parents and the teachers and the other people in the church, and they didn't seem any particularly more happy or successful than anyone else. They still had problems and times of unhappiness. So I thought maybe this isn't quite the answer here. So I thought, well, where else can I find? Where else is the answer? And then somebody told me, well, what you need to do if you want to be happy and successful and live a great life is you need to get an education. So I went to university for 7 years and I studied music actually. But what I noticed there was, again, the professors and my teachers and colleagues, they seemed to have a lot of knowledge, but they weren't any happier or more successful than anyone else. And I certainly wasn't. And I still had problems and stress in my life. So I thought, what do I do now? And then an uncle of mine said, why don't you have your own business? That's the key to being happy and successful. And he had a business and he seemed pretty happy. and he had plenty of money. So he said, you know, if you need to earn a lot of money, or quite a bit of money, and then you can do whatever you want and you'll be happy and successful. So I did that. I set up my own business, and I studied business, and I studied marketing and all those things, and I worked really hard, and I was successful in business, but I still had lots of problems, and I had lots of stress. And if I really thought about it, which I did, I wasn't as happy as I thought I should have been. And I certainly wasn't feeling that deep fire in the belly, as it were. So I thought, what do I do now? This isn't necessarily the answer. And then I got into the whole personal development, self-help, self-improvement world. And I did lots of seminars and read books and went to seminars all over the world, and learned about setting goals and reprogramming your beliefs and reprogramming your subconscious mind, and doing all of these different techniques and strategies on how to be successful. And what I noticed at the seminars was that most of the people there didn't seem much happier and more successful than most other people either. And I wasn't any more happy or successful. So, and again, I had lots of problems. I had lots of stress in my business and my personal life, and I'd go through phases where things were going really well, and then a whole lot of problems would come along, and I'd have to fix those again. And, it's just this roller coaster. And so I thought, well, this isn't, if I'm really honest, self-improvement techniques aren't working for me. So I thought, what's next? Well, then I discovered spirituality, which of course is different from religion. But, I heard about things like the so-called law of attraction and meditation. And I learned to meditate, and I did lots of spiritual practice, because, the thinking there is, spiritually, that is how you bring success and happiness into your life. So I tried all of that, same thing, still had lots of problems, still had lots of stress, wasn't really working for me. And I looked around at the other people involved, and it wasn't really working for them either, whether it be the teachers or the other students of the various practices. So anyway, life carries on. And then something happened. So by this point, I was a master of success. I'd tried all of these different techniques. I knew I'd read all the books, a lot of books. I knew all the right words to say, the right things to think, the right things to believe, but I still had lots of problems. I still had lots of stress. And I wasn't really feeling like I was in the flow of my life. I felt there was something missing, something big that was missing. And then something really interesting happened that should never have happened to me as a master of success. And that was, I lost everything. And literally almost overnight, I became homeless. I had nothing. I had to move back in to my elderly mother's small apartment and sleep on her couch. I had no friends, no money. All my businesses, I had several businesses, several homes. It all just went. And I was thinking, why has this happened to me? This shouldn't happen to me. I've learned all about how to be in control of your life and how to make things happen. And here I am feeling utterly powerless as to why this has all happened. So what I did then was quite interesting. I mean, I went through a few months of, the pain of getting through it, but I did get through it. And what I noticed after that was my life turned out completely differently. And I started to find I was attracting to me different sorts of people. I attracted a different relationship to any that I'd ever had before, far more fulfilling and satisfying. And business opportunities were starting to come to me. I was finding there were ways to make money doing what I love to do, rather than being stressed and trying to figure out what to do. So opportunities were coming to me. I was making them all the money I needed and wanted, and I was starting to do things, some of which I'd always dreamt of doing but never been able to, and other completely new things I'd never thought about, but which were amazingly great experiences. And the best part of all was I didn't have any stress and problems. And I remember thinking to myself, what's the difference between my life now with, really where I'm in the flow? I've got the fire in my belly. I'm doing what I love, and I'm not experiencing all these problems and roadblocks coming in the way all the time. What's the difference between that and the previous life where I'd learned all of these different techniques and really worked hard and ended up with success on one level, but a lot of problems and stress? So that led me to back engineer, if you like. I said, I've got to have to figure this out because it's working, but what's working? Why is it working? I didn't know. And that led me to a whole lot of discovery about the human brain. And there was another clue I got from this, and I was doing marriage and relationship coaching. I still do a lot of that. And my main area of focus is helping people to avoid divorce. You know, usually people are in the situation where their husband or their wife has come along to them and said, I don't want to be married to you anymore. And those people, they don't want to end their marriage. So they come to me for help, and I have programs and I do private coaching as well. But one thing I noticed was very interesting was some people managed to heal their marriage and other people didn't. And I thought, what's the difference? Because it wasn't the information that I was giving them. You know, the information I share is very effective, but I give all the same information basically to everybody through my programs. So it wasn't the information, and it wasn't the amount of information they had already gathered about how to create a good relationship, because some people had read lots of books and been to other coaches and done other things. Other people hadn't done much at all, but it didn't seem to have an impact as to whether they managed to heal their marriage or not. And it didn't come down to motivation, because they're all very motivated in that situation. So it wasn't a question of motivation. It also wasn't a question of prayer. Some people would say to me, and I pray every night for my marriage to be healed, and it didn't work. And other people didn't pray at all, and they managed to heal their marriage. So what I observed from working with other people through this was what had happened to me was that there was something different about how I was using this machinery of my brain that was causing me to get different results. And this is very different to the mind. I'm not talking about, you know, we hear about beliefs and, you know, positive thinking and the mind and all of those things, you know, belief. It wasn't anything to do with that, because when the research I did was into the physical brain itself, the mechanical machine of the brain, because on a very true level, the brain is nothing more than a machine. And what it's designed to do, what the brain is designed to do, its main function is not just to keep you alive and to manage everything about your life, but it's to make sure that you are the best that you can possibly be. And that means physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And the reason why it's designed to make you the best that you can be is because even on a biological level, your purpose is to be the best that you can be, because you have a biological purpose. And every biology scientist will tell you that the purpose of life, there is a purpose to life. And we're humans, we have life, obviously. And we have the same purpose biologically as every other species, which is to do your best to create more life. So the purpose of life is to create more life. That's the biologist's conclusion or, you know, answer to what is the purpose of life. So if you think about that from a human perspective, that makes a lot of sense, because for you to have your best chance of survival and so that you contribute to the continuation of the species, to do that, you have to be your best. Because when you're your strongest, you fight off disease, you fight off enemies, all of those things, when you're your strongest and you're healthiest. But when you're mentally and emotionally at your best, you also are your most creative, you're your most resourceful, you're the most able to find better ways for you to survive and thrive. So this was, to me, was a really significant realization that not only are we striving to be the best that we can be, because we know that when we are, that's when the fire is in our belly and we're performing our best, but actually we're supposed to be that. That's our biological purpose. We're designed to be our best. And that leads to another interesting point or conclusion, which is, well, if the purpose of nature, if our natural biological purpose is to be the best that we can be, has nature, or nature must have provided something, some tool or set of tools or some machine for us to be able to do that. And it must have, that's logical, and it has. And that thing, that machine or set of tools, is the human brain. So on a very physical, you know, we're not even talking spiritual here, we're talking on a biological, physical level. The brain is a machine that's designed to work in a way that that ensures that you are the best, or that strives to make you the best that you can be. But here's the other interesting thing about a machine, because I thought, well, is the brain just a machine? Well, it is a machine. It's the most powerful machine that exists in the universe. It's infinitely more powerful than any other computer that exists. I don't know if you know, there was several years ago, they did an experiment. I think it was in Japan, and they used the world's 4th largest supercomputer at that time. And they carried out one little process that the human brain can complete in 1 second. And they tried to replicate this process on the computer. And what took the human brain, or takes the human brain 1 second to complete, just one task, took this supercomputer 40 minutes to complete. And yet the human brain does hundreds of thousands of processes every second. This was just one. So we don't realize how infinitely powerful our brain actually is. But here's the thing, it is a machine. And if you think about every machine, if you use it the wrong way, what happens? You have problems. You know, a good example is your car. You know that if you get in a car and you want to go somewhere, what do? You get in, you know which buttons to push, you know the right fuel to put in the car, you switch the engine on, you press the right things and you pull the right things, and the car takes you very smoothly, very comfortably, no problem at all, to where you want to go. However, if you don't know how to use the car, you put the wrong fuel in, perhaps you go, well, I drink water, perhaps cars drink water, so I'll put some water in it. That sounds logical. And you get in and you go, what's all these levers and buttons and things? I don't know what to do here. And you pull the handbrake on and you put your foot on the accelerator at the same time. Now, you might get somewhere, but it's going to be a hell of a trip. It's going to be very uncomfortable. And at some point, the car is probably going to break down if you're using it wrong. So you're going to end up with a problem. So, but you don't say to yourself, there's something wrong with me, or there's something wrong with the car because I've got a problem. What you say is, the reason there's a problem is I've used it the wrong way. I've used the machine the wrong way. It's not designed to create problems. And sometimes people think, well, this car's not working. I don't really know how to use it. I know, I'm not putting in enough effort. So I'm going to get out and I'm going to push the car to where I want to go. And I'm going to put in a lot of effort into pushing it. It's a huge strain and we're not really getting anywhere, but that means I need to be stronger and I need to build some strength and muscle so that I can push it even harder. And what happens then? You just wear yourself out, you damage your body probably, and you're not getting anywhere and it's no fun. So that analogy is very like the human brain. And the reality is we are designed to have a life, because if the brain's designed to make sure we have the best life possible, that can't include problems when you think about it logically, because there's no benefit to us in a problem. When you have a problem, when you're stressed or worried or unhappy, you're creating enormous strain on yourself physically as well as mentally and emotionally, but you're actually damaging your body. And there's a lot of research that has shown that stress is the biggest cause of physical problems in the body. And so having problems, feeling stressed and anxious, there's no benefit in that to us. It's not helping us live longer. It's not helping us live better. It's not helping us be creative. So a problem is actually just a sign that you're using the machine of your brain the wrong way. Just like if you use a car the wrong way, you get a problem. It's the same with the human brain. And the more I got into this and started to find out there are different parts of the brain and they have different functions and they operate in different ways. But the more I realized, the basic reason why people have problems in their life is they're using there are actually 4 parts to their brain, physical parts, different places that have different functions. They're not using them in the right way. Just like that in the car, they're not pulling the levers and rods and switches in the right way. And what shows up in their life is problems. But once you start to realize how your brain works and how to use it in the right sequence or use these 4 parts in the right way, it's what happened for me. All of a sudden, problems, I didn't seem to have any problems. And it wasn't through I was trying to fix the problems all the time. That's what I'd spent my previous life doing. That didn't work. but there's a different way to use your brain so that you don't create problems in the first place, which is a major issue for most of us. I look back on my life, and a lot of my problems were based on decisions of making the wrong decisions about things because I was stressed and afraid and worried and all that. So when you use it the right way, not only do you stop making more problems for yourself, but you solve problems in a much easier way. And you just find that problems don't become an issue for you in your life. And I know it sounds a big claim to make, but you think about it on a logical level, just from what I've explained, and it's absolutely true on a biological level.
Where does that sit? I'm interested, because I mean, some people it's work long, fill the body with caffeine or other substances, whatever else, and you want the best performance, that's how you do it. And if I'm hearing this correctly, Liam, what I'm hearing is it's actually the other way around. It's like if you're putting your body under stress, if you're putting your brain under stress or whatever else, you're actually jamming it up. Have I understood that correctly?
Absolutely. And I think part of the problem is what you're saying there is people misunderstand what stress is or what hard work is, because it doesn't mean you don't work hard. It doesn't mean you don't push yourself or do new things, challenge yourself, all of those things, but you do it in a way that's not stressful or not damagingly stressful. Because if you think about a lot of athletes, artists, musicians, performers, they all talk about this thing about being in the flow, where they're creating, or they're, if they're an athlete, they're performing amazingly well, but it's almost effortless. And there's something coming from somewhere else that's creating this marvelous result. It's not the result of strain and stress and pushing. And when I really think about it, and it's true for the people I work with as well, that when you are straining and struggling and you're under stress and you're feeling really anxious and afraid, you don't perform well. It's not actually true that you bust through your fear and then perform well. What actually happens is you're struggling and you're straining and you're worried, and then at some point, and this is what happened when I lost everything for me, you let go and you say, I'm not going to do it like this anymore. I'm sick of the struggle. It's not working. And then, and I can explain how this works from a brain perspective, but then that's when something else takes over and actually puts all the effort in for you. And that's when you start to really get the results. So often people think I'm getting results because I'm stressed, struggling, and really making it happen. But that's not when you get your best results. When you get your best results is when you're in the flow and you're feeling energized and excited, and you really get results that way.
I mean, I hear people, and I suppose it's even been true of my own life, where they say it's really from your darkest hour comes your brightest moment. And again, as you were sort of saying, that moment where you find yourself moving back in with, your mother and that aspect, but that's almost a stripping back, right? It's kind of a, here you were on this pedestal. Oh, life's just knocked you off that pedestal, and this is a master reset. And do you believe that's the case? So, I mean, you almost have to go back. You have to, if you're not built on solid foundations, then you're easy toppled. But that toppling actually does no harm, because ultimately it's hard at the time, but then it's the rebirth, it's the regeneration forces you to do it right the next time. I probably asked you about 6 questions there, but I'm just, does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think what the best question of those to answer is. But I think this idea that, your biggest calamity, your biggest tragedy turns out to be your greatest gift. I think it's very true. And it certainly was for me. And I think, it was pretty well the best thing that ever happened to me, was losing everything, because it did create this reset and this new understanding after the reset of what the reset actually means, and put me on a much better path. And so I don't think you necessarily have to go through that to create the reset. And that's what my process called neurostate rebalancing, which is about rebalancing these 4 parts of your brain so you live in a way that automatically allows your brain to make you the best you can be. That is a way of bypassing the pain, if you like, of having to go through this reset process through living through something very traumatic. But it really begs the question, why are we so upset when we see people go through bad things, quote unquote, or why are we afraid of ourselves going through quote unquote bad things? Because they usually turn out to be a great gift and a great experience. And there's been countless examples of people who have said the best thing that ever happened to them was something terrible that appeared terrible on the outside, So that's an important distinction to make about, is to think, why would I avoid anything? Lessons are there that are going to make me better. So embrace the lessons as well.
Much of this is coming, I suppose, with hindsight, right? So you're looking back and saying, this is the way it works, or, because you're saying, you're reviewing your thoughts on the brain being essentially a very incredible and intelligent machine. But it is just that, right? It's a machine, and it's processing both good, bad, whatever. It processes the whole lot. So I suppose my question there is, how does the brain tie then to spirituality, let's say? Where does the brain operation, and where does the brain thought come from? And do we have a higher connection which steers the brain, if you like? So I know it's probably quite a deep question, but curious to your thoughts.
Well, the best way to answer that is maybe to explain what the 4 parts of the brain are, because one of those parts is our connection to infinite intelligence, basically, which is the intelligence that surrounds us, is in us, and is all around us. There is an infinite intelligence. There's something that's making all this universe work. And we can all agree that, something's at work here. We can also agree that whatever it is infinite, that there is no end. And if it's infinite, it also must be intelligent. And that intelligence must be infinite as well. And of course, people then think, you're talking about God. So we put labels on it. We call it God or universal energy, or, there's an endless number of names that we can give it, but it is a universal infinite intelligence. And if it is infinite, and if it's infinitely intelligent, we must be a part of it. And therefore, we must have access to it. And leading from that, there must be something about us that gives us access to it, a tool whereby which we can access it. And it's one of the 4 parts of the brain. But here's the really interesting thing. It's the part of the brain that most of the time and most people is shut down because they're using their brain in the wrong way, which blocks your connection to that infinite intelligence. But it's that infinite intelligence that knows how to make your life the best that it can be. And it knows all these things about you that you don't even know, but you can't access that if you're using the brain the wrong way. It's a bit like you can't drive at 100 miles an hour in your car effortlessly if you're still struggling with the handbrake on and in reverse gear trying to go forwards, and you've got water in the fuel tank. It's just not going to happen. So the key is to learn how to access that part. And when I lost everything, I stopped using the part of my brain that was making me stressed and afraid and blocking that. And I stepped into, unknowingly at the time, but I figured out, as I say, since what happened, I stepped into the part that actually took over and sort of turned my life around and made it work, whereas I'd been struggling before. Perhaps I'll give you a quick rundown on what the 4 parts of the brain are and how you can actually access that creative part.
Yeah, please.
So basically, is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so basically there's 4 parts to your brain. And we've all heard of the neocortex, which is this big bit over the top. And I call it the thinking brain, because this is where everything that comes at you from your 5 senses and your thoughts all gets stored in there as information. So it's the part you think with, okay? That's your thinking brain, and that has an important function. It's also where your communication ability comes from, your ability to talk and read and write and all those things. So it's the thinking brain. The second part of the brain, which is just below the neocortex, and there's a couple of places, one's called the amygdala and the other's called the hippocampus. A bit technical, I won't get too technical about it, but that's the emotional brain. That's where your emotions are generated. And the way the brain does generate emotions and feelings is that It triggers hormones or neurotransmitters that make you feel a certain way. So there are, happy ones like oxytocin, and they make you feel good. And then there are other ones like adrenaline and cortisol that make you feel fear. But the emotional brain is what creates, it's different from your thinking brain. It's like a switch between your feelings, and it makes you feel good or bad, or variations thereof. There's a third part of your brain, which is what I call the doing brain. It's often called the mechanical or the survival brain as well. And that's at the base of the skull at the back, in the brain stem. And that's what takes control of all of the non-thinking parts and non-emotional parts of your body, such as all the automatic things you don't think about, your breathing, your heartbeat, the function of your organs, all of those things that happen automatically are handled by this part of your brain. And there's one other very important function that that part of your brain has, and it's why it's called, for one of the reasons it's called your survival brain, is that we've often heard of the fight, flight, or freeze instinct, your reaction to danger. That's triggered in the survival, all of that takes place in the survival brain. So that's when you instinctively react against some danger. So in ancient times, you're a tribesman and you're walking through the forest and you hear some hissing in the grass and it's a snake, and you react. And you don't think about it. You just react against the danger. Or you see a lion running towards you and you shout out for help, or you run away, or you try and fight it, or you climb up a tree or whatever. But all of those things you don't do without thinking. But something has been activated in your brain which has said, there's an immediate danger, react, get rid of it. Okay? So they're the three well-known parts of the brain, but there's a fourth part of your brain, which is your creative brain. And they've only relatively recently discovered these functioning parts of the brain, but they sort of exist around the middle, underneath the emotional part of your brain. And there's an area called the pineal gland, which you might have heard of. That's the central part of this creative brain. And this part of your brain, this is responsible for things like your creativity, your intuition, your gut feeling about things, your new ideas that you come up with. All of these things that don't really come from your thoughts, but you're like, oh, you suddenly get this idea to do something differently, or you come up with a new situation, or you get a gut feeling about something. You go, that doesn't feel right, or that does feel right. All of these are from your creative brain. And the other thing, this part of your brain, now remember we said the brain is the most infinitely vast computer that exists, infinitely powerful computer that exists. So the other thing we have to accept, because we live in a universal intelligence, there's nothing random that happens. Everything is part of this intelligence. It's just not by accident. If anything happened by accident in this universe, it wouldn't exist. Quantum physicists have established that. We live in a very narrow band where everything is very structured and very intelligent. So because of that, because there are actually no random events in life, apart from we think they are with our limited thinking brain, part of our brain, there's no random events. So this creative part of your brain, which is your direct connection to infinite intelligence, that also brings to you things like coincidences and synchronicities. And you go, how did that happen? Why did that happen? This is your creative brain at work. And the other thing about your creative brain, and people say, oh, but these are just chance happenings. And but I am in control of my life. But if you think about, for most people, if they think about the really important things and events that have shaped your life, they're never the result of your planning. I mean, the person you meet who becomes your husband or your wife, the night before, you're not sitting there writing down your goals list and saying, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m, I'm going to meet a woman who's this, this, and this, and we're going to get married and we're going to have 3 children, this, this, and this. Or I'm going to get this particular business opportunity and this is what I'm going to do. If people really think about it, most of the things that shape their life are not, there's something else controlling it. They're like chance events. And you think back later, wow, I'm so glad I met that person, or I found that business opportunity or whatever. So this is all the creative brain at work. And here's the thing, when you're in your natural state, when you're being the best that you can be, which creative people call the flow or in the zone or whatever that is. Your creative brain is what's guiding and directing your life, and it's continually trying to bring you the right situations, the right people, the right circumstances. Trying to get you to do the right things, not do the wrong things, and guide you to be the best version of you, the best version of yourself that you can be. But most people aren't doing that. What they're not using their creative brain to bring to them. I mean, sure, you have to work at it. You have to, you can't just sit there and do nothing. You respond, but this part of your brain also is where your motivation comes from, to do the right thing. Away from, you might be a little fearful because it's unknown, but you still do it because you know it's the right thing. So most people aren't using that, but instead they're using a different part of their brain. They're trying to think everything through. And they're, as I said at the beginning, their thinking brain is very limited. All that you've got in your thinking brain is a collection of your experiences and knowledge that you've gathered in your lifetime. But that's like saying the answer to the problem you're looking for is in one book, when you've got access to every library in the world, which you do through your creative brain. And you're trying to solve a problem with one book, and that's what everybody's doing. They're trying to figure out, okay, and they do things like set goals and, right, I need to figure out what I want, and I need to try and figure out how to get it. And I've got a problem here. I need to try and figure out how to fix it. And what do I do in this situation? And I'm going to write down a big list, and I'm going to read another book and get some more information. I'm going to ask people, and we're going to get together, and I'm going to fix this problem. And I'm going to decide what I want in my life. And I'm going to set goals, and I'm going to work for them, and I'm going to figure out why I'm not doing what I'm doing. All that's your thinking brain, and it's limiting, because here's one of the things about goals. And it took me ages to realize this. I don't set any goals anymore. I've been to endless goal setting workshops, and I spend years writing down on my goals and everything like that. But when you set a goal, most of the time, what you're actually doing is just limiting yourself, because you're thinking, maybe if I get that, I'll be happy. Because the only reason you want anything is to be happy. You want to be the best you can be. You want to feel great. So you set a goal and say, when I have that amount of money, then I'll be happy. Or when I live in that house, or I have that business working in that particular way. But you don't actually know. Your thinking brain can only refer to your past experience to figure out what you want. But your creative brain already knows what you want or what you need to be happy. And it's probably something you've never thought of before, because you've never experienced anything like it. This happened to me, and I've worked with people who've done it as well, who've ended up, as I did, doing something completely different that you never had planned or ever thought you would do in your life, that turns out to be really great. One chap I was helping, he was working in a very high pressure business, and he decided to go off and run a diving school. He'd never done it before, but it just came along as an idea, and he loved it. And he was like, why didn't I do this years ago? So when you allow this infinitely creative machine to tap into infinite intelligence, it's going to come up, it's going to say to you, look, I know what you want. Why are you trying to figure it out? Well, you don't know with your thinking brain. So the thing, that's what happened to me.
So yeah, sorry, we lost you there a wee bit. So, but you were saying there, as I understand, almost the thinking brain is the brain that's, that's the bit that's almost, we're writing these goals, and this is quite controversial because people do. It's like, write the goals, goal setting workshops. If you don't set your goals, then you don't set your future and all the rest. But you're sort of saying that's not quite right, which I think is fascinating, right? So if we're not setting goals, then what are we doing? What should we be doing?
We're doing what it says in the Bible, because the Bible is actually one of the greatest success manuals ever written. And as I said, I was brought up religious, so I do know the Bible fairly well. And what I realized when I studied all this brain, came to all these discoveries about the brain, was all of it is explained in the Bible and in actually every other great religious writing and teaching as well. And in most spiritual traditions and in most philosophical traditions, teach this exact thing. They teach us how to use our brain the right way so that we create the perfect life. Well, that we're the best that we can be. The Bible to do. What's the number one instruction in the Bible? It says this more than 300 times. Somebody counted. That is, be not afraid. Have faith. Do not be anxious. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, give no thought for tomorrow. Do not worry about tomorrow. Do not think about tomorrow. Look at the lilies in the field, how beautiful they are and how looked after they are. But don't worry about what food or drink you're going to, look how well they look after they are. Don't you think you're going to be much better looked after than they are? So, and what he's referring to, what the whole teaching about not being afraid is, here's the thing, and I'll explain why this works on a physical level.
So yeah, so you were saying there, really, so the creative brain, if I'm understanding this correctly, so instead of acting with the thinking brain where we're setting goals, it's the creative brain is really should be doing the heavy lifting. Hence what the Bible's saying is really be not afraid. So is it the creative brain, or is it you tapping into another source outside of yourself even?
Well, you are tapping into this infinite intelligence, but your connection to that is through your creative brain. It's not through your thinking brain. If you want the answers to what you want and what you're supposed to have, or if you want the answers to anything, it's the same with artists who are creative. They create a painting or they write a piece of music and they go, and I notice this with my own writing, I've written a lot of books and I read it and I say, who wrote that? And it's almost like some other part of you is writing it, because you are tapping into something else that's outside of you. But it's not really outside of you if it's infinite, because you must be a part of it, but it seems like it's outside of you. But this is the part we're all supposed to, as biological beings, be allowing to, protect us and guide us to be the best version of ourselves, to be the best we can be. Can I just say there's another thing on the biological side of it. People say, well, I don't quite understand this be the best you can be thing. Why would that have, or what people often get stuck on is this, well, who is the best version of me? And the best version of you is, on a biological level, contained in something called your DNA. And I guess we've all heard of DNA. It's something that's in all of our cells. And what DNA is, it's actually a formula or a blueprint for exactly who you are. And there's more than 250 million individual pieces of information in every strand of DNA in your body. And they're all unique about you. So the brain, on a very practical level, all it's trying to do is bring out the best of the information about you that's contained in your DNA. And that's unique to you. So you can't compare yourself to anyone else. And you also can't go, and this is why the thinking brain doesn't work, because you go, well, I need $1 million a year to be happy, because your thinking brain is, you've heard of other people who make $1 million a year and they're happy. So it's a comparison thing. But your unique path to get these 250 million pieces of information expressing themselves at their best is your own unique path. So this ties in a little bit with this whole idea of goal setting as to why it doesn't work. Because again, why would you try and work stuff out when the answers were already there, when someone else had figured them out who was far more powerful than you, and you just had the access to that information?
I'm going to step off the ladder a sec here, possibly, but I mean, does the best version of you exist and the worst version of you exist, or is it all just are you always your best version? It's just the thinking brain that decides what version it is that you are seeing or being?
Well, I guess the best version of you is when you're at your happiest, you're healthiest, and you're most fulfilled. So when you're feeling in a state of feeling fulfilled and truly happy and in the flow of your life, that is the best version of you. I guess it's not really the best version of you, that's the real you. That's the 250 million pieces of information about you that are being expressed. So when you have problems, when you're feeling stressed and problems show up in your life, you're not able to be the best. You're not able to allow those 250 million pieces of information to flow and flourish and express themselves, because you're dealing with things that are conflicting and creating stress upon you and harming you, if you like. So the best version of you is you being in the flow of your life. I mean, another thing, you know, I do a lot of traveling around on a boat. I think I mentioned to you. And the marvelous thing about that is I'm in nature so much of the time, most of the time. And when I really observe nature, I'm very lucky to be able to do this. And I look at birds, you know, animals in nature. What you notice if you really, really look, insects, all of life, everything just has this natural order, this natural flow. I mean, I really, you know, maybe your listeners, here's a good exercise. Just go and sit somewhere and observe a bird in its natural environment. And people go, oh, that's a bit silly. Most people haven't done that. They haven't really done that. Sit down and look at a bird. You know, don't watch a wildlife documentary to tell you what, to make you have ideas about how nature is. Go and see it for yourself. And what you'll notice in the natural world, this is amazing natural flow. Every animal, every creature is just existing and living in a state of harmony with itself and with everything else. There's no struggle. You know, there's life and death that's part of the flow, but there's no stress and strain and struggle. Everything is just flowing. So we're supposed to be like that as well. You know, we are part of this natural order and flow, and we've just made it through lots of, for various reasons, we've made it too hard for ourselves. We're making it too hard for ourselves. And by making it too hard for ourselves, we struggle, we stress, we try and figure stuff out, we worry, we do all of the things the Bible says not to do, because you can't use, it's not the right way to use your brain. And we end up with these problems in our life, and our reaction or our response to our problems is to try and fix. Problems are natural and problems are good. You know, they make you better, make you stronger. Everybody has problems. And these are all just ideas that have become accepted, but they're not actually true. You really think about them. There are people without problems, not many. They're and problems aren't good. You don't grow from your problems. You actually grow from what your problems might teach you. But would you rather have problems to learn, or would you rather just have a good life to learn from? I'd rather stick with a good life. Now shoot me down in flames.
I mean, it's always interesting, isn't it? Which is more important? Is it important to, you know, to achieve the most, or is it important to actually to be your true self, if that's the case? I mean, even being your true self, is that possible? You just are yourself, full stop. Well, your question about should you achieve the most, what you have to, I guess, way of looking at it is, why do we want to achieve more? Why do people set goals? Why do they want things? Why do they say, I need to be better, stronger, I need to be more? Why do we want anything? We want things because we think when we get those things, we will be happy. So we're still need to get more and more because we think it'll make us happy. So happiness is the highest goal that we all have as human beings. It's the only thing we're all striving for, is to be happy. So it's just everything else we think will make us happy is our measure of what happiness is. But how many times go, yeah, that's okay, but it's not quite as good as I thought it would be. And I used to do this most of my life when I'd set goals, and if I achieved them, yes, I made more money. And for a bit I thought, oh, you know, I used to think,
if I could only make that amount of money per year, I'll be so happy. And you make that amount of money, and you get there and go, well, I've still got stress and problems. I need to make more money. It's happy. But what I'm saying is, when you use your creative brain, you realize that you're designed to have everything you need to make you happy without struggling to try and get it. And in fact, struggling to try and get it is actually going to block you from getting what you need to be happy, because it's going to cut you off from your creative source, from the part of you that's connected to infinite intelligence, knows everything that you need and really want to be happy, so that you will be happy when you get there and in the process. And this is the problem with trying to figure, as I said earlier, when you try and figure out what you want, it's invariably going to be the wrong thing. Now, sometimes you have a goal where you see something and you have this knowingness. And I think there's two types of goals. There's wanting goals and there's knowing goals. Wanting goals are based on fear, and knowing goals are based on your creative brain. So sometimes, and this happened to me, I remember going into a house once, my wife and I at the time, we were looking for a new house. We went into this house and the price was 3 times the budget, 3 times what we could afford. But I just went into this house and I said, I knew we were going to buy that house. I didn't know how, and I was a little bit taken aback, at the thought of it, but there was part of it went, we are supposed to have this house, and we will. And everything fit into place to make sure, and we did get that house. And I was really happy in that house. So there's a certain type of goal, it's like a knowing goal, you know that you're going to get it. But that's very different from what most people's goals actually are, where they try and figure out what they want based on fear, based on, well, I'm not happy, but if I can only get that, that'll make me happy. Do you see what I'm saying? The difference between the two. So I don't know if that answers the question. I'm not sure what the question was, to be honest, but there is a place for goals, but most people misuse goals and they're trying to force things to happen in their life. And maybe I could share a bit about what blocks your creative brain from working, and why this be not afraid thing is so important, and why goal setting is part of, usually for most people, is a fear-based activity. And anything you do based on fear is not going to work for you. It's using your machine, this infinitely powerful machine, it's using it the wrong way if you're trying to force something through fear. And the reason for that is what actually happens. I teach this in my neurostate rebalancing course in a lot more detail, and I have a podcast called Using Your Brain for Success where I talk a lot about this as well. But what basically happens in your brain, as I mentioned, there are 4 parts. There's the thinking part, the feeling part, the doing part, and the creative part. And what actually happens is your thinking part of your brain is gathering information from all your senses. So in every moment of your life, everything that's going on around you, your thinking brain is interpreting what that means. So it's saying, well, that's a blue sky, and that's a brown earth, and that's a flower, and so it's interpreting all that, and all of that information comes in. And what happens next is your emotional brain analyzes that instantly, and for one thing, and it's asking the question, is this safe or dangerous? So your emotional brain is constantly monitoring your environment to make sure you're kept safe. And if it says, no, this is all safe, if it means that it's safe, that's when it releases these neurotransmitters that make you feel good, and that unlocks your creative brain. And and your life just goes on in the flow, in the zone, bringing to you everything that you need to be your best, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. However, if the emotional brain looks around and it sees something that is dangerous, that it interprets as dangerous to your survival, it activates your survival switch. So when you think about it, most of the time you're supposed to live like nature, happy, fulfilled, doing all the right things, allowing everything to just flow. But you might occasionally have something like a lion run out at you, or you're standing on a train track, or you're standing on a road and a car comes towards you, or someone comes running at you with a knife or whatever. Very occasionally, there's a threat to your survival. So what your emotional brain does is it looks at the information and it says, aha, danger. There's a threat to your survival. And what it does then is it releases a different set of neurotransmitters, hormones, which create fear. And fear is the signal to your survival brain, to the part of your brain that says you're faced with a danger. You've got to react. You've got to get out of this danger straight away. So it kicks in the survival instinct that gets you to react to the danger. And we think, well, that's really good. You know, if there's someone running at you with a knife, you've got to react. And this happens a lot faster than thinking, because if your thinking brain got activated, you know, be trying to analyze what was going on, it might be too late. You might be harmed or dead. So your emotional brain, when it kicks in this signal to your survival brain, here is a danger, deal with it, get out of it straight away, react. That's really good for when you're in a situation where you're dealing with an immediate danger. But the problem is what actually happens in that situation. What your survival brain does is it takes all of the resources in your body and directs it towards that danger. And anything that's not necessary for dealing with that immediate danger, it takes away that, it shuts that down, literally, whatever that function might be. It shuts that down and redirects all of the energy to dealing with that immediate danger. So that's why you can run faster, or your breathing gets a lot harder, or you can, you can be stronger. There are reports of people who've got great strength in times of threat. So, and that's really good. That's what you want. But this is what happens. It takes away everything that's not necessary to deal with that immediate danger. What's not necessary to deal with that immediate danger? Your creativity, your awareness, your insight, your gut feelings, or your creativity. All of those things are not only not necessary to deal with an immediate danger, they could be harmful. Because if there's a car or someone running at you with a knife, you're not going to be thinking, now let me think here, I need to come up with a strategic plan on how to deal with this situation. I need to evaluate all of the possible scenarios and I'll write them down as to what this situation might mean. So that would be hopeless. So your creativity, your creative brain, and your greater awareness is not only unnecessary, but could be harmful in that situation. But here's the other thing that happens as well. When you switch on through fear, this energy which activates your reactive brain, or this fight or flight instinct, it also shuts down your greater awareness of what's actually going on in your life, and it focuses only on the negative. Because again, if someone's running at you with a knife, your brain doesn't want to be going, oh, there's a man running at you with a knife, but look at the beautiful sky. Isn't it a lovely sunset that's forming at the moment? And oh, look at those little children walking on the street. You have to block all that out. So what your brain literally does on a physical level, it blocks out anything that is not a danger. And when you really think about it, what happens for most people living in fear? They have a very negative view of the world, of their life. And it's not they necessarily want to, it's their brain, that's what it's focused on. Its job in that state is to find every single potential problem, danger, threat in your life and focus on that and how to deal with that. It's not capable, or it's not designed to give you the big picture. And this is, this is so interesting, because when people are in this fearful, anxious, worried state, they do tend to focus on the negative. And we see this in world events. People are so worried about things that are just, if they were in their creative brain and stand back with it, and with a greater awareness of who they are and on the big picture, they'd be going, why am I worried about these things that I see on the TV? Or, what have they got to do with me? And, people say, well, that's a bit of a harsh thing to say. That's not reality. But it is reality when you're living in your creative brain. It's only when you're in your fear-based brain that you see all these things as being big problems, when they're not for you. And all they're doing is stopping you from living your creative life. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. This is what's activated when you feel fear or anxiety. And it's designed to deal with one very specific thing that's an immediate threat to your survival, and it's supposed to get you to do take quick, decisive, instant, the easiest, fastest thing possible to get out of that threat, remove that threat, and get back to living your normal state in the flow, in your creative state.
So what's your options here, Liam, do you think? I mean, because we sort of covered really the highs and lows of the brain, if you like, that, you know, in many ways, your thoughts can't be trusted, I suppose, is maybe the best way of thinking, or your thinking brain can't necessarily be trusted. It's not creative per se, but what do we do about it? You know, knowing this, well, what's the answer? What's the best way forward?
Well, this is what I teach in neurostate rebalancing, which is a process I've developed to answer that very question. How do you do it? But because there's two things, really. The first thing is you've got to develop your understanding about how this works and about how you work. Because like any machine, you know, if you don't know how it works, when you do know how it works, then you can start to say, oh, it's been crazy. I've been using it the wrong way. Why would I do that? And you can see what the problem is that you need to overcome. So that's really important. And that's why I spend a lot of time teaching about how your brain, you know, in more detail than I've been able to do in this, but in more detail about how your brain actually works as a machine. Because it's a bit like a car. Once you know how it works, you'd think, why would I ever get in and pull the handbrake on and put my foot on the accelerator at the same time? Why? That would be crazy to do that. Why would I? So, because you understand that it's just counterproductive. It's just the wrong thing to do. It's just going to end up in problems. So when you understand how your brain works, you go, why am I using that way? And what you start to realize, the thing that you're doing, which is again coming back to what the Bible says, you're being afraid when you shouldn't be, you know, and you start to think, I've got to get rid of this fear, because the fear is what's stopping you from having everything that you want in your life. Fear is the enemy. That's why it says in the Bible 300 times, be not afraid. Whatever you do, don't be afraid. Because when you're afraid, you activate your sympathetic nervous system, you shut down your brain's infinite part to bring you all of the solutions to any problems, stop you having problems, give you your perfect life, give you the life you're designed to live. You block all that out because you're making your brain think you've got to react to something around you. So that's the first step. You've got to really start to understand this, that when you feel fear, it's a bit like when you're in your car, when you've got the handbrake on, there's nothing you can do about it. Doesn't matter how motivated you are, how much you want it to happen, how much you the wrong way, and you're not going to go anywhere, or it's going to be a terrible trip. So you know then what you've got to figure out is a way not to put the handbrake on. That's it. There is no other solution. You've got to figure a way to fix that. And it's the same with when you understand that fear activates your sympathetic nervous system, which blocks your ability to solve problems. Einstein once said, just as an aside, the same thinking that creates problems can't be used to solve the problems. And that's what he's referring to. You know, you can't use the fear-based part of your brain, which creates the problems for you. You can't use that to solve the problems. You can only use your creative brain. Because here's the other interesting thing about the fear-based part of your brain. It's continually, when you're in that state, it's continually looking for problems and for danger. And if it can't find any danger, it's going to make it up. You know, so you're continually going, my body or my brain is telling me that there's a threat here. Where is it? Well, I can't see it. Oh, well, I'll make one. Or I'll create it, so I'll create a new problem. I'll make a wrong decision to create a problem, because the brain is trying to create problems to solve, if you like. So that's the first thing, is coming back to your question, how do you deal with this? You've got to understand how your machine works, and then you go, now I know at least what I need to do. I need to figure out how to use my brain the right way, and I need to realize that the only problem I have in my life, is creating fear when it's not necessary, when I'm not faced with an immediate threat to my survival. Because what's actually happening is somehow you've wired your brain, you've tricked your brain into believing that there's something happening that's a threat to your survival when it's not. So you watch something on the TV which says there might be a nuclear war in whenever, or some country's doing something, or there might be some disease that's going to kill everybody, or the planet might warm up, or, you know, and your brain is taking all this stuff in, and because you're being fed that this is all could kill you on some sort of level, your brain is getting into this fear state and saying, you're faced with an immediate danger. What are you going to do about it? And the brain in this state is very reactive. So it has lots of great ways to take you out of immediate pain, because it can't solve the problem of fixing the planet, but it can solve the problem of you feeling better in the moment. And that's its role in the fear. But how can I make you feel better right now, which is a way of taking you out of your danger? Okay, grab a cigarette, grab a drink, watch some mindless TV, shout at somebody, have an argument. These are all things that make you feel better. You know, eat some food that gives you a sugar rush. These are all things that make you feel better for an instant, but they certainly don't solve the problem, do they? But they're just your brain trying to react to because it thinks you're in danger. So the second thing you have to do once you realize that fear is the enemy is you have to try and, I do this through neurostate rebalancing, get your brain to realize or change what your emotional brain is identifying as danger, and realize that what it thinks is dangerous, a threat to your survival, isn't dangerous at all. You know, the really interesting thing about this, what I realized was, and what this comes from, where the dangers come from, are our underlying fears that we have in our life. And nearly everybody has got underlying fears. And people can say, I'm not afraid. No, I'm not afraid. But if you're worried and anxious ever in your life, there's always an underlying fear, because your brain is saying there's something to be afraid of. The fear or the feelings are simply the result of an underlying fear. They're not the cause. You feel bad because there's something in your brain which says you're afraid of it. Okay, so I realized for myself, this is really interesting, was for me, I'd been driven by two, because most people aren't aware of what their fears actually are. And in my neurostate rebalancing, I take people through a process to uncover what your fears actually are, because you need to know, you know, often you get rid of them just by realizing what they are and say, well, I'm afraid of that. But what happens is I realized I was afraid of two things for most of my adult life. One, of having nothing, and two, of not being loved. And that had driven all my decision making throughout my life. So I was always striving to earn more money and make more, and I was always striving to, you know, be in a better relationship or whatever. But because they were because all my decisions were based on trying to avoid these fears, I made lots of wrong decisions. And the funny thing was, then I ended up with nothing, not being loved. I ended up with the very things that I was afraid of. But this is when the magic happens, because what my brain said then was, you know, you have to be, you will die if you have, literally, you will die or be severely hurt. There's a threat, a big danger to you if you have nothing and if you're unloved. But when I experienced having nothing and being unloved, when I was living on the couch in my mother's flat, I had nothing. Nobody loved me. You know, my brain went, hang on, this isn't so bad. Why have you been afraid of this? There's nothing to be afraid of here. You're still here. Life's okay. You don't need to be afraid of those things. They're not real, those fears. And so I was able to release those fears. And therefore, instead of being put into this anxious, fearful state, worrying about not having anything or not being loved, my brain was able to say, they're not things you need to worry about, because if you have nothing and if you're not loved, you'll still be fine. They're not a threat. They're not a threat to your survival. So then I was able to allow my creative brain just to be activated rather than my fear brain, and bring me the stuff that I was supposed to have to be the best that I can be, or strive to, you know. Obviously I'm not perfect either, but that's the general pattern. So this is the thing, you need to uncover what it is. First, you need to know that fear is the enemy on a physical level. It's blocking you from fixing any problem you have in your life. You know, can I just give you an example? I'm sure your listeners have been in this situation, and you might have as well. I know I have as well, where somebody you know has a big problem, and it might be in their relationship, or it might be in, say, their career or their business or their job, And they might come to you or they might not, but you can see very clearly what the solution is to their problem. Say somebody who's in a bad relationship, and they come to you and say, oh, my husband or wife, they treat me really badly like this, and we have all these problems, and they're so awful to me, and we don't get on, and we fight and everything. And you can go, bang, I know what she should do, I know what he should do. And you say to them, why don't you just leave the guy? Why don't you leave her? You don't need that. You can get far better somewhere else. Don't put up with any of that. It's crazy. And they say to you, oh no, no, we can fix it. No, I couldn't. No, I'm committed to fixing my relationship, or I'm committed to making this part of my business work. When you say, well, their business is just a waste of time, it's a disaster, get rid of it, or that staff member or whatever, it's not helping. And the reason you can see it but they can't is because you're not emotionally attached to that situation. So you're not living in a fear state. So your brain, you're living in your creative state when it relates to that issue. Your creative brain can see the big picture. It can see the solution. It's not driven by fear, but they literally can't. Their brain is not allowing them to see what the real solution to that problem is, and it's certainly not allowing them to act on what is the real solution either. It's stuck in this state of reacting to a danger. And so they say, I can fix it. I'll work harder. I'll try harder. It's not as bad as I thought. I just need to learn something new. And that's all the brain trying to come up with these little quick fixes, which are all the wrong solutions. So this is how you can see that fear is the enemy. Fear is blocking somebody from making the right decisions and creating the right outcomes in their life. And it's the same, it's easier to see it for someone else, but it's the same for us as well. When you're in that fear state, I'm sorry, but the truth is you haven't got a hope of solving a problem or living the life you're supposed to be living. So the trick is, how do you get rid of the fear state? And the first thing is to understand what you're afraid of. And the second thing is to retrain your brain to realize that the things that you think you're afraid of are nothing to be afraid of at all.
Well, what's more important then, to release your, let's say, your emotions, fear, pride, whatever, all the emotions, release your emotions from the past, or to set actions or do things for the future? Which is more important, one, to let go, or two, to create your future self?
Well, by letting go, I think we've misinterpreted what creating your life is about. It's not something you create through your thinking brain. It's something you allow to be creative by you working in harmony with your creative brain. So when you get rid of your fear, you do create your life, but you don't sit down and create a grand plan for your life. You allow your life to unfold, and you do what it says in the Bible. You give no thought for tomorrow. And giving no thought for tomorrow doesn't mean, after the sun comes up tomorrow. It means, when is tomorrow? Tomorrow is the next moment. And an ultimate expression of fear is not living in the present moment, because your thinking brain is always projecting what's coming up. What can I do? What should I do? And that's all based on fear. When you have no fear, I don't know if you've seen the film The Matrix. But Morpheus says to Neo in there, when he's getting him to try and see things, he said, you have to let it all go. Fear, doubt, and disbelief. Free your mind. That's it. So when you let it all go, and you realize there's a part of you that's far more powerful than your thinking, struggling part, that just allows things that's going to guide you in the right way, that you don't need to do any planning, or sometimes you might feel like planning something. You might come up with a project that needs a bit of planning, but you don't try and figure everything out and work it out and plan your life. You just realize your life is being planned. Well, not your life, but you are planning your life in a different way, in a truly creative way. And that way you can just sit back and see what shows up and act on what shows up, rather than trying to figure stuff out and get worried and control everything, because you can't control it anyway. That's the other thing.
It's that I mean, I find that so fascinating to. Before that, I sort of wanted to cover an area. I mean, there's an expression which I particularly like, in for a lot of people, saying their voids are their values, and I think for me that just resonates so strongly. So many people, they do things because something happened previously, and that said, this is who I am, or this is the way I act. This is, my core values are X, Y, and Z because someone has done something to me in the past, or something's happened in the past. I mean, first of all, does that resonate, that, our voids are our values? I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just saying for many people, that is the case.
Well, what we need to realize is that our values are not shaped by what happens to us. They're shaped by what we think that means. And there's a really good story of two soldiers, excuse me, who were fighting in the Vietnam War. I think it's a true story. And they were on the front line in the jungle, shooting at the Vietnamese and killing people, and watching their comrades being killed as well. And they followed up with these two, they were friends of each other, these two soldiers, about a decade later. And they found one who was living under a bridge. He was homeless, he was an alcoholic, he'd been through 4 marriages or something, and he was totally unhappy. And they said, "Why is your life like this? How does it relate to when you were a soldier?" And he said, what that war taught me is humans are evil. Life is horrible. It's dangerous. People want to kill you, and they give no thought for you or anyone else. The world is a horrible place. Now, that was his interpretation of what went on, and that had completely, you could say they're his values, but they're what it was the foundation of the decisions he made in his life, and that's how his life turned out. Now, the other soldier, they caught up with him. He lived in a beautiful home. He had a wonderful wife and family and children, and he was really happy and healthy, and I think he had his own business. He certainly had plenty of money, and he was just, and they said to him, that experience, what did Vietnam teach you? And he said, what it taught me is life is precious. Life is really special. And I'm so grateful every day that I am here and live in this wonderful world that I can experience, and that's what that experience taught me. So this is same experience, two completely different interpretations of what happened. So this is why when things happen to people, I could have looked back on what happened to me with losing everything and become really bitter about it and said, oh, it's terrible, it should never have happened to me. I'd spent my entire life working my butt off to build up everything I had, and then it all just got taken away in a really unfair way. It was these awful people who came along and just, took advantage of me. I could have interpreted that way, or could have interpreted and thought, wow, what have I learned from that? What gift have I been given? What am I doing now as a result of that? That I would never what have I learned that I would never have learned if I hadn't gone through that experience? It's made me better. So I think it's really important, before people put labels on who they think they are based on what's happened to them, is to think what's happened to you is not about what's happened to you, it's about what you think it means. And you can't change what happened to you, but you can change what you think it means. And if you change what it think, and nothing has any real meaning at the end of the day, it's only the meaning you give it. So why not look for, and if you're in your creative part of your brain, you will find through a bigger awareness, a greater awareness, you'll see the big picture of what's happened to you, and you'll realize that it had a really positive purpose. And maybe if you're going through something bad at the moment, or think something you're struggling with, instead of asking yourself, why is this happening to me? Ask yourself, why is this happening for me? Why is this happening for me? What's the gift here? And you immediately shift from your fear anxious brain, your sympathetic nervous system, to your creative brain, and your brain sees the big picture. This is why it's happening to you. It's a gift so that you maybe go on and do great things as a result in the future. You share with other people your experiences and help them, whatever it might be. So this is a way to get unstuck. And I think it's really sad that so many people are stuck with the story that they have about themselves based on what they interpret as the meaning to what's happened in their life. And it doesn't need to be that way. And you don't need to be the victim. And in fact, when you're not the victim and you unlock your creative brain, you're the one who benefits. your brain goes, oh, now finally we're back on track. What was I doing? Oh, that's right. I was organizing all the best stuff possible for you in your life, wasn't I? Well, come on then, get out of the way and let me give it to you. You know?
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, that sort of aspect of life is happening for you, not to you. And as you say, that's a wonderful question to ask. Is, when things happen, of course, the monkey mind or the thinking brain says this is terrible. This is, someone's against me or life's against me or whatever. It says, but if we can look past that and say, what is the lesson here? What's the, rather than sitting in the experience and the perception, is to sit separate from the perception and saying, well, what's the lesson here? What could you learn here? Right? That's game changing, right?
It sure is. And the other thing is that happens when you do that, when you get out of this fear-based attitude towards what's happening, and you start to use your creative brain in a different way, you can start to see a solution to your problem. If you've got a problem, maybe you're maybe you're in a bad relationship. Most of the people who I work with who are having problems in their relationship, they do all the wrong things to start with. But when you shift your brain and you're not based on fear and you're not worried about what's going on, you actually do much better things, and you actually create solutions to your problems rather than making things worse. A classic example is with relationships, and some people find the things I say controversial, but I'm only coming from experience and practical honesty. The thing about goals that I found, for most people, they don't work, and I've explained why I don't think they work or why they don't work. But the other thing is with relationships, people come to me and say, oh, well, my wife and I have been to counseling, because what do people do when they have a problem? They immediately try and fix the problem. So they have a problem in their relationship. We've got a problem with our communication or our intimacy, or we're arguing, or we don't like each other, or whatever. We need to go and find a solution to that problem. So they focus on the problem, but that's the wrong approach. And so they go to counseling, they try and figure it out, and they sit down with a counselor and they go, right, well, when he does this, then you do that. And then if he does that, we'll do this instead. And people come away from counseling and they go, now, what was I supposed to do? And they still fall into the old patterns of arguing and, not feeling any better about each other. Why is that? Because they're trying to use the wrong part of their brain they're trying to fix a problem. But if you use your what happens if you have problems in a relationship and you're not using your fear-based brain, is you do the right thing. So you don't, if your husband or your wife tries to argue with you, you go, look, I'm not interested in arguing. See you later. Bye. I'm going out for the afternoon or whatever. You're not interested in arguments. And if they say to you, well, I want to leave, you go, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. But if that's what you want, well, why should I try and get in the way? And how can I support you, and let's stay friends? So you actually can heal that relationship by, being sympathetic to your spouse and not trying to oppose them or attack them, which only drives them further away. So that's a small example. I don't know if I explained it very well, but because there's a lot to it. But you tend to do a lot more of the right things when you're not worried about what's going to happen. Another example is in a job. If somebody's in a job they don't like, why do they stay in a job they don't like? Because they're too afraid that they won't find another better one. But if you weren't afraid, if you knew your creative brain was designed to find you the perfect job, because it's designed to make that you're really going to be happy, you don't have to try and even figure out what that job is. You just need to respond to the signals that brain gives you. So you're not going to hang on, struggling, stressing, trying to work harder at that job, or getting angry with the boss, or getting angry with your family because you're not happy. You're just going to let the creative part of your brain come up with the solution, and it will. But this is where faith, if you like, again, the Bible talks about having faith, because your thinking brain doesn't know. So it's very tempting to think, well, because I can't see the solution, I can't see the way to do it, I can't, I don't know how to do it, or I don't have all the information. You think then that you don't trust that there's another part of your brain that does know all of that stuff. It will take care of all of that. It's far more powerful. So that's why people get afraid and stressed and try and, you know, work on problems, fix things, force outcomes, set goals, figure it all out. It's all based on fear, rather than just say, hey, I'm looked after, everything's going to be perfect. I just need to do what I need to do when I need to do it. And what do I need to do right now? That's all you need to think about. I spoke to a man in one of my podcast episodes. He was very successful in business. He had more than 1 million customers. This was a few years ago. He's retired now, and 500 staff. He had 2 private jets that he flew around the world in. And he said, Liam, I never had any of that in a goals list. You know, it's pointless having goals. You're limiting yourself. I could never have seen any of all of that happening to me. So it's not what, you know, if you stop limiting yourself through fear, you're amazed at what shows up. And I know this personally. I've been amazed at what's shown up in my life since I've just thought the right thing will show up. If I don't know what to do, I don't need to know what to do. It'll show up. And it always has.
If we're not setting goals, would it be useful, or is it, I mean, is there a benefit to almost setting almost a code of conduct for yourself and saying, right, I'm not necessarily going to be specific about the things that I want or I need. However, if I made a promise or a code of conduct to myself to say, listen, I will live my life with faith, and, you know, when I have fear, that I will recognize the fear and try and let go of the fear or something else. Is that a more useful thing than goals, maybe?
Yeah, well, definitely. And I think, again, that comes from understanding how your brain works and how it can bring you what you want, is it shows you what you need to do. And one of the most important things you need to do is you need to say, how can I stop fear getting into my life? What do I need to do right now to make sure that fear is not a part of my life? And some of those things are very simple things. You know what they include doing? Not watching the news, not listening to negative people. They're 2 of the biggest things you can do, because it's a bit like your body. If you put physical nutrition or food into your body, if it's good for you, you're going to stay healthy. If it's bad for you, you're going to get sick and have problems. But it's the same with mental food. If you put negative, toxic thoughts and ideas into your brain, you're going to get toxic results. So one of the main things that I live by is, what can I do right now to make sure I don't have fear in my life or anxiety? And if that means not watching anything on the news or whatever, I haven't watched the news for more than 10 years, and my life's far better as a result, because I'm not giving it any negativity, so I can see big picture and I can allow my creative brain to work. It's such a major thing. It's not get involved in conversations with people who want to talk about something negative, or, you know, some world event, whatever that might be. And, you know, to me, it's even come down to things like going to a restaurant. You know, my partner and I, when we go to restaurants, which isn't very often these days, but when we have done, or even when we've been out in social settings, we've been into restaurants and we've gone, this doesn't feel good, this energy, does it? And we get up and leave. You know, or you go into a shop or a business, or you talk to people. You know, we travel a lot of the time, we meet a lot of people, and we're in conversations, and we get very attuned now to saying, this person isn't making us feel good. They're not interested in us. All they're doing is talking about themselves. All they're interested in is talking about some world war thing, or I don't know. We don't enjoy this. It's not making us feel good. It's creating a feeling of anxiety, or just not a good feeling. Okay, see you later. You know, that's it. You have the control and the power to do that. You have the power to block or stop, not get involved in negativity if you choose to. And if you just did that, what's going to happen? You're not going to activate your sympathetic nervous system. Your creative brain's going to take control of your life. Your awareness is going to be expanded. You're going to see things in a completely different way. And here's another really important thing to realize about seeing things. When you use your brain the right way, your awareness shifts. What you see shifts, and what is revealed to you is the truth. And you start to see things that are actually true, not what people have said is true, or what the media are trying to tell you is true, or marketers, or the people who are trying to keep you in a state of fear so that they can manipulate you to sell you more of their stuff or their philosophy or political beliefs or whatever. You're not controlled in any of that sort of way. The truth gets revealed to you, and that's when you are immune to a degree to all of this. But coming back to your question, if there's a philosophy to live by, it's say, what can I do to prevent fear and anxiety or worry coming into my life right now? Whatever it is, you've got to do it. When you realize that is the number one and only enemy you have, you've just got to do whatever it takes. And it's not that hard, and it gets easier the more you do it, because you become supported. It's a bit like when you're in a toxic relationship. And I advise a lot of people on this, that if they're in a toxic one and the only thing stopping them from leaving is their fear of what might happen when they're leaving, when they get rid of that, the answer is to leave. If it's toxic and it can't be, and it really is toxic, there's, again, coming back to your brain wants to protect you. Your brain wants to give you a better relationship somewhere else. You're only blocking it because of your fear, after all. So the enemy, get rid of this fear, any toxicity in your life. And if you really want to take it to the extreme, that means all forms of toxicity. There's a lifelong process. The food you eat, anything you put in physically or mentally, you don't need to get paranoid about it, because paranoia is fear, isn't it? But as much as possible, become aware of your environment right in this moment and how you're feeling. And if you're not feeling good, say there's something my brain's telling me is not good in this environment, I need to see what it is and eliminate it, or eliminate my reaction, the reason I'm feeling fear. And it could be something you can eliminate by leaving a situation, or not allowing something to come into your life, or it might be something you need to deal with on a more inner level about what is it I'm afraid of that I shouldn't be afraid of, or I don't need to be afraid of.
It's so powerful, isn't it, to sort of understand that aspect of, the way the mind works, and almost take a third-party view of yourself almost. So to disconnect from the thinking mind, right? To say, well,
yeah,
that's not who I am. That's a part of me that's here to serve, and some of it is useful and some not so much, but I can disconnect from it. I can have separate thinking processes, or separate feeling processes to the thinking mind. I mean, that's useful in itself, really, right?
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of spiritual traditions, one's based on meditation, such as Buddhism and Zen and those sort of Eastern religions. A large part of what their philosophy is based on is actually eliminating your thinking, because when you're thinking, you're not really in your creative state. This is why again, artists and people, they get lost in their music or in their art and in their creativity, or they're an athlete, and they get lost in the experience. They're not thinking about it. They get beyond this thinking state. And a lot of meditation is to try and train the mind or the brain to stop thinking. Thinking is a sort of a disease, really, because it's useful in a limited sort of way. But the problem is, most of the time we're thinking, we're not experiencing where we are right in the moment. And therefore we're not in our creative brain. We're still trying to figure stuff out, and we're trying to evaluate things, and is this right or is this wrong, or what does this mean, or and we often take comfort, or we've been given this idea to take comfort in more information. You need more information. If you've got a problem, well, go and there's a book to read the book and try and figure it out. They're the answers, etc. But I did that for years, reading all these books, trying and getting all this information. But when I really think about it, I'm not saying knowledge isn't useful, but you'll find the knowledge you need for what you need when you need it, if you use your creative brain. You're not constantly seeking out this information, trying to create your life through information. because it's not the way it works anyway. You can have all, you can have so much information, but and still do all the wrong things, which is what I used to do.
It's having that trust and faith that the right thing will happen regardless.
It's using your creative brain.
Yeah, totally, right?
That's a physical, that's the way the machine works, I
mean, is our imagination almost the biggest gift that we have, or our ability to think outside of ourselves?
I think imagination is one of the tools that we have, but the biggest gift we have is awareness, being aware of what really is. And it's only when you come to the present moment that you stop thinking, that you start to see there's something a lot more going on here than I ever really realized. Most of us spend most of our life not being aware of very much at all, because we're a lot lost in our thoughts all the time. And we, how many of us ever sit down and really look at a sunset, or really experience what's going on around us? Look at our hand and just without judging anything, just observing. And when you do, your awareness shifts, and you're aware that there is some sort of infinite power, force, intelligence that's guiding all of these things, that is far, far more complex and operating on a level that we couldn't possibly understand. Even our own body, all of science is very good at describing what's happening, or coming up with a theory about what's happening. But in terms of explaining what it's actually happening and why it comes up very short. And yet we continually think, well, information is going to provide us with the answers. We know virtually nothing about anything. So it's not where the answers lie. And again, when you're in your creative brain, you become not reliant on information and thoughts. When you need the right stuff, it'll come along. You're more in a state of awareness of what is, and really wonder at the incredible, infinite and complexity and beauty of everything, really. And that in itself makes you feel a lot better, doesn't it? I don't know if you've seen a film called Avatar. That was quite an interesting film, and it had this technological, power, guns society against people who just lived in total harmony with nature. And theirs was the far greater power, but they weren't the strategic, planners and ravagers of everything. They just existed and let things flow naturally.
It's interesting, because somebody recently, and I'm going to completely butcher this saying, but it was along the lines that, it's the likes of the Dalai Lama and the likes of, there's so many great leaders of that aspect have, lead armies of people, so-called armies of people, with no force, but they have a far greater army in the world than any dictator ever has. And it's that difference of, it's leading with love, or leading with potential, leading with imagination, as opposed to, you must do this, you have to do this, which worked for a time. And I know even for myself, in terms of the way I led my life, they'd worked for a time. I'll push hard, I'll do hard, I'll work hard, I'll do all this until you get so exhausted you can no longer do it, until you then have to sit back in the, for me, in the sort of the subconscious mind, the creative flow aspect, and then say, listen, I trust what needs to happen will happen. And at that point, then you're flowing, right? It's beautiful. Beautiful. I am a little bit conscious of time. So, but Liam, tell me, if you were to try and describe then your fire in your belly and what this is all about for you in one or two words, what would they be?
What I'm interested in is uncovering the truth, about who we are, what is, and that's what drives me, and where that takes me, and in what form I allow my creative brain to show me what forms those take. But I think truth is what everybody, there's the saying, know the truth and the truth will set you free. And I think it's, to use the word, it's true. But that's what drives me. That's what makes me feel passionate is, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be in an area of business or, but anything. I want to know what the truth is about something. And that's what's drawn me to study the brain. I want to know how we really work, who we really are. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but you know, I don't need to have all the answers. I'm not trying to give people answers. I'm just trying to give them an understanding so that they can find their own answers to whatever their own questions might be, by trusting that the part of the brain that has all the answers will give it to them if they allow it.
It's kind of getting out of your own way, right? I love it.
Yep, it's another way of putting it. It really is.
So tell us, where can our listeners learn more about you? Where can they hunt you down, track you down, stalk you, any of the above?
Oh, well, they're welcome to do all of the above, but if they're interested in all this sort of stuff, and I hope people are, of course, because I think it's so important, but I've got a lot of stuff on my website, which is just my name, liamnaden.com. So it's got all my podcast episodes and links to all my, you know, books and things. So that's, yeah, liamnaden.com is where you'll find me.
Love it. And Liam, have you a final word for our listeners this evening? Final thought?
No, I can't think of any other than to say, you know, I hope this resonates as an idea with people, and just to say, if people think this is all a load of bunkum, which I hope I've explained logically why this works. So it's not just an idea or a belief that I want people to have. I hope it makes some logical sense. But any idea that you reject, I think you need to think, is it rejecting because I have some belief that I'm afraid that there might be an answer that I don't want to hear? You know, because when you don't have any fear, you're totally open-minded to possibilities. And so rather than being closed-minded, and again, I'm not saying your listeners are, but if people come up with an idea and say, well, that sounds a bit hard to believe, well, maybe just do a bit, and not just what I say, but anybody, I'll just do a bit more research, and rather than think that's hard to believe, I'll just find out, is that true? Could it be true?
It's just being open enough, isn't it, really, to say, well, what if?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just let, you know, don't make life too hard. I mean, I think there's an expression someone said, if it hurts, you're doing it wrong. You know, and most people, we do make our lives too hard, much harder than they're supposed to be. I mean, nowhere in the Bible did God say he wants your life to be hard. He says the opposite. He said you'll be looked after. You know, don't worry, don't be anxious. You're the most beautiful creature there is. Of course you're going to be looked after. You don't need to worry about it, but just allow yourself to be looked after. Trust that you will be looked after, and that if you don't trust, you're going to create problems for yourself. That's it. You know,
I often liken it to skiing. It's actually harder to ski badly than it is to ski well. But yeah, sometimes we've got to go through the pain barrier to get to the skiing. You know, skiing.
Well, it's to a point where you're no longer afraid, and you're trusting, isn't it?
Yeah, trusting, absolutely. Liam, it's been fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate your time, and listen, I wish you all the best, and I've no doubt we could speak on for a hell of a lot longer. So I thank you for this, and yeah,
thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thank you.